The brilliance of music is that it's a living, breathing beast, one that thrives on chaos and becomes truly transcendent when its creators hurl themselves into the fire, emerging with something untamed and real. It's not just about playing the right notes or nailing the perfect take. It's about spirit, that indescribable energy that makes the hair on your arms stand up. Keith Richards has spent his life chasing that energy, and he knows better than anyone when a musician has it, or when it slips through their fingers. That's why his take on Jimi Hendrix is as fascinating as it is unexpected. Richards, a man who practically bleeds rock and roll, saw Hendrix as both a revelation and a conundrum. It was the late 1960s, and rock music was undergoing a seismic transformation. The Rolling Stones were no longer the brash upstarts playing Chuck Berry riffs at blistering speeds. They were finding their own voice, steeped in blues, rebellion, and a raw authenticity that set them apart from their peers. Albums like Beggar's Banquet and Let It Bleed saw the Stones fully embracing their identity as the gritty counterpoint to the Beatles' polished experimentation. They were creating anthems that felt both timeless and immediate, songs that oozed danger and defiance. At the same time, Jimi Hendrix was rewriting the rules of what a guitarist could do. He wasn't just playing the guitar, he was bending it, twisting it, coaxing sounds out of it that no one had ever heard before. Richards first encountered Hendrix in a relatively modest setting, back when Jimmy was cutting his teeth as a sideman for Curtis Knight. "I first heard him on the road with Curtis Knight," Richards recalled, "and then I used to see him play at a club called Ondine's in New York. I thought I was watching someone just about to break." Even in those early days, Hendrix was a phenomenon, blending R&B grooves with a kind of raw electricity that made it clear he wasn't just another guitarist. He was something else entirely. Hendrix's live performances were the stuff of legend, even at the time. Imagine a man stepping onto a stage, guitar slung low, and from the first note, he has the audience in the palm of his hand. He didn't just play music, he seemed to channel it, pulling sounds out of the air and shaping them into something utterly unique. His performances were visceral, chaotic, and transcendent, the kind of thing that could make even the most seasoned musicians question everything they thought they knew. Eric Clapton, for instance, famously recounted his first experience seeing Hendrix saying, "I just turned to Chas Chandler and said, 'You never told me he was that good.'"
I ran backstage and Eric was standing trying to light a cigarette, His hands were shaking. He just says, "Is he really that good?"
Hendrix didn't just impress, he overwhelmed. For Richards, seeing Hendrix live was a revelation. "It was like watching something otherworldly," he later said, reflecting on those early encounters. The sheer physicality of Hendrix's playing, the way he attacked the guitar and coaxed it into submission, was unlike anything Richards or anyone else had seen before. But for Richards, there was always a tension between the Hendrix he saw on stage and the Hendrix he heard on record. "When I first heard the record start coming out," Richards admitted, "I was disappointed. It wasn't that the music was bad, it was extraordinary. Tracks like Purple Haze and Foxy Lady were groundbreaking, filled with textures and ideas that hadn't existed in rock music before." But for Richards, the records lacked the raw, unfiltered energy of Hendrix's live performances. "The sound was thin," he said. "It didn't have the same weight, the same intensity. Live, he was a monster. On record, some of that fire got lost." This critique wasn't unique to Richards. Even some of Hendrix's closest collaborators felt the same way. Mitch Mitchell, Hendrix's drummer, once commented on the challenge of capturing the energy of their live shows in the studio. "We were always chasing that feeling," he said, "but it's a different animal in the studio. You don't have the crowd, the adrenaline, the chaos. It's a controlled environment, and sometimes that control takes away from the magic."
And a lot of the early stuff was done basically in 2 or 3 takes. And as much as Chas Chandler never let us forget that House of the Rising Sun of the Animals was made for $10, £4. and it sold ultra a million copies.
Part of the issue was the sheer complexity of Hendrix's music. He wasn't just playing guitar, he was layering sounds, experimenting with studio effects, and pushing the limits of what the technology of the time could do.
Jimmy liked to spend time in studio and experiment, find out what could be done. It wasn't like at that point you couldn't, press a button and have instant phasing or flanging. You had to rig up another tape machine and all kinds of shit. But that was half the fun of it.
Albums like Electric Ladyland are masterpieces, but they're also dense, intricate works that require careful listening to fully appreciate. For someone like Richards, who thrives on immediacy and raw emotion, that density could feel like a barrier. Jimmy was always experimenting, Richards said. He was always trying to find new sounds, new ideas, but sometimes I think he got lost in it. The simplicity, the rawness, that's what made him great live, and that's what I missed on the records. Hendrix's relationship with the music industry also played a role in how his music was perceived. As a black musician in a predominantly white rock scene, he was often pigeonholed into roles that didn't fully align with his artistic vision.
Not necessarily, no. Because we're making our own society. If you give us a chance, they might. Oh, I shouldn't say that. No, I love that dropout, man. I'm still living and breathing just like you. We just look a little different, that's all. We just have different ways of expressing ourselves. The idea is to communicate. And for everybody to be respected, regardless of what group scene you might be in,
Richards saw this clearly, recognizing the pressures Hendrix faced to conform to the expectations of the psychedelic era. Jimmy was put in a box, Richards said. They wanted him to be the psychedelic guy, the wild guitar player, but he was so much more than that. He had this deep connection to the blues, to funk, to soul, and I think he wanted to go back to that, but the industry wouldn't let him. In some ways, Richards' reflections on Hendrix are as much about the challenges of being an artist as they are about Hendrix himself. Richards knows what it's like to struggle with expectations, to feel the weight of an audience's demands. The Rolling Stones have had their share of missteps, albums that didn't quite hit the mark or capture the essence of what the band was capable of. It's part of the process, part of the endless push and pull between creativity and commerce. Yet for all his critiques, Richards never dismissed Hendrix's brilliance. He saw Hendrix as a once-in-a-lifetime talent, a man who changed the game in ways that are still felt today. Jimmy was something else, Richards said. Even when I was disappointed with the records, I couldn't help but admire what he was doing. He was pushing boundaries, trying things no one else was trying. That takes guts. Hendrix's influence on guitar playing is undeniable. Even Richards, who's no slouch on the instrument himself, recognized that Hendrix raised the bar to an almost unattainable level. One guy can ruin an instrument, Richards once said, half joking. Jimmy, bless his heart, almost ruined guitar. He was the only one who could play like that, and everyone else trying to copy him just fell short. In the end, Keith Richards' reflections on Jimi Hendrix are a testament to the complexity of artistic genius. Hendrix was a man who lived and breathed music, a man who burned brightly and left a legacy that still resonates. But he was also a man, with all the flaws and limitations that come with being human. Richards, ever the realist, saw both sides of Hendrix, the extraordinary and the imperfect. And in doing so, he reminded us that even the greatest artists are only human, chasing the same fire we all are, hoping to capture it, if only for a moment.